those folks in use safety. We're going to go ahead and get started. Just some quick ROEs for the webinar. If you participated in Tuesday, it will be very similar. We're going to take your questions, write them in the chat box, and I'm going to go through the briefing, and then at the back end we'll do our best to answer all of those questions. So please use the chat box. Let us know your name if you're just logged in and guest, and where you're writing in from, and we'll pick those up at the end. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. This morning is cost savings. So we're going to talk about that piece of our CAMP model and how we calculate an SIR and get some points in the model. So a little agenda here. My brief intro, I'm going to talk about some of the myth busting similar to previous webinars, and then talk about how this fits into the model. And then I'm going to walk you through the project savings calculator and show you that tool that we rolled out, and basically a step-by-step tutorial on how to put a project in and get an output on the back end. So we'll go ahead and get started. First thing, myth busting. So you might have heard out there, Energy Focus Fund is going away. Well, that is true in the sense that we're not going to have a set-aside pot of money anymore to fund just energy requirements. So that piece of that is true, but the myth is that energy is not going away. Energy and cost savings in general is becoming a part of every single project and every single investment decision we make. So arguably, it is more important now than when it was a set-aside focus fund. It's now going to be a part of all our business decisions. Second myth, we can't use BLCC anymore. So all the energy managers and REMs that have been using BLCC and become experts over the last few years, don't worry, this is not true. We are still going to use BLCC, and we want you to use BLCC if you have the capability and capacity at your installation. The reason we've created this project savings calculator is to support those installations that don't have that capability locally, or their energy managers and those that know how to run BLCC are just too bogged down. So the project savings calculator is just an additional tool to help those folks capture some savings in their requirements. Third myth, why aren't we focused on the best savings? We aren't focused on the best savings requirements. That came in with our review of our business rules. Some folks said, well, you know, if I have an SIR of 6, that's better than an SIR of 2, so I should get more points. The bulk of our model is going to be based on risk. And the reason why your points are limited to 10 points and an SIR of 1 for a risk-based project is because we want risk to drive the model. In the event that there's close tie in scores of similar requirements, the savings piece is what is going to push one requirement over the other. Now, for those best savings requirements, though, that you talked about where you have the high SIRs, those are absolutely going to float to the top. They might not have a good risk score, but they're going to have a very good savings score and a high SIR, and we're going to take those and we're going to group them together, and we're going to get visibility of them in front of our senior leadership at the CE Council, and we're going to let them tell us where those projects score. But by all means, the highest scoring project, the one that's going to pay itself off the quickest, is most certainly going to have visibility and be inserted into the IPL and funded off the top. And the last one, AFCEC built this thing in a black box. That's absolutely not true. We've been working with both MAGCOMs and BASIS to test run this and get feedback on them on the best way to do this. And we know it's not perfect. So by all means, if you have some ideas out there and you are willing to participate, please let us know. Our goal is to make this better in each subsequent cycle, and we know this is just the first step, but by all means, help us out, help us make it better. All right, so the model, how does it fit in? Two-pronged approach to savings. You may have seen this slide before if you've participated in the initial business rules discussion in the Warnord briefing, but basically two approaches, and I briefly touched on them already. So cost savings for risk-based projects. That means a project's going to have a score for probability of failure, and it's going to have a score for consequence of failure, both of those on a 100-point scale. There's going to be 10 additional bonus points, so to speak, for savings. So a project that has a SIR of 0 to 1 will get anywhere from 0 points to 10 points in that model. And this includes everything, all O&M, energy. You can use BLCC or the savings tools, and we're going to verify it here at AFCEC. But bottom line, the risk will drive that portion of the model, and savings will kind of be used as a tiebreaker in that sense. Now, savings as a strategic goal is where we're going to attack those high SIR projects. So it could be small dollar requirements that provide the best bang for our buck, or it could be just some good investments that are going to take care of themselves in no time. We're going to identify those requirements and lump them together in increments based on similar SIR, and we're going to put that in front of the CE Council and let them decide and make some strategic trades to determine where they go into our IPL. And what I mean by strategic trades is that we're going to look at them and we're going to compare it. So if something if we insert these requirements and we lose a runway somewhere, well, the owner of that runway might have an issue with that. So we need that discussion to take place between our senior leaders so that we can make a good corporate decision that we can all live with. So what does this look like? You might have seen this risk matrix before. This is kind of how it's laid out. So you got consequence of failure on the y-axis, probability of failure on the x-axis, and the size of the bubble is essentially our savings. So in the top right quadrant of the graph, you see a lot of requirements up there, and those are the ones that have a high risk score. But then I've added a couple more down there, numbers 8 and 9, where you see that they don't score that well based on consequence of failure and probability of failure, but they have a good return on investment. So those are the ones we're trying to identify, and we're going to pull forward and lump together potentially for funding. So now, project savings calculator. As I mentioned before, best method to calculate an SIR, and we know that, is the Building Life Cycle Cost Program, the Department of Energy program that we've been using in the energy for the energy projects for the last few years. We know that's the best, and by all means, if you can do it and you can use it and you have the capability of using it at the installation, then please do. Calculate an SIR just like you would for an energy project and then put that value into ACES. The project savings calculator, this is for you if you don't have that expertise at the base or capacity. And it's for you if you want to add a few more projects to IPL. So you might use BLCC for the top half of your program, but there might be a number of projects on the bottom half that you want to quickly be able to get an SIR and get it in the system so it'll compete a little better in the camp cycle. So this is a good way to do it. And we understand it's not perfect. It's not going to measure your components down to the air handling unit in terms of the energy saved, but it's a good start and it's easy to do. So with that, I'm going to share the project savings calculator here and let you guys basically walk you through it, and I'm going to put in a fake project and kind of talk through what we're looking for when you're populating the project savings calculator. So I'm switching over here. I'll give it a second, but you should be able to see the project savings calculator now on your screen. And so we're just going to walk through and put in some project data. So the first section here, section A, is pretty self-explanatory. Actually, before I do that, I want to do some quick navigation through the site. Let me zoom in here. I see some people aren't seeing it too well, so hopefully that's a little better. But at the bottom you have an input tab and a summary tab. Input tab is where we're putting in all the information. That's where you're going to actually input data. And I'll switch over to the summary tab. It's going to give you some of the results of that data you're putting in. The key one there I've highlighted in yellow is the savings to investment ratio. That's the number we're looking for our scoring. For you guys that are into programming Excel, down at the bottom you'll see that there are other tabs in there, and that's where all the calculations are being done. But there's a bunch of them. If you want to unhide some of those tabs and look at it in the build-up, please feel free to do so. We're not trying to hide anything by any means. So if you want to look at that, feel free. I've just hit them now so that it's easier to navigate. And also on both sheets, you'll see on the top right is a help feature. It's a simple drop-down and pretty much covers all the topics in the book. So if you have a question on what should go in there, click on any of these topics and get a little bit of a little bit better explanation. All right, so we'll go ahead and get started. In the first section, Section A, I'm just going to enter a project number. This is going to be no different than your project number from ACES. And same with the title here, just pulling it straight out of ACES. Location, you'll see here that it's everywhere CONUS, and then also at the bottom of the list we have OCONUS locations. So the goal here is click the closest installation to you. If your installation's not on there, you can click an area. Like for example, this one here, I'm going to use Texas and use San Antonio for our location. And again, this is given an area cost factor to change the pricing a little bit based on your local area. Construction start 2015, so this is for the year that we plan on building it. So we're using this for the 15-16 cycle, and duration of the project 6 months. Pretty easy for Section A. So Section B, proposed acquisition costs. You can see here there's a method B1 and a method B2. So method B1 you can use for your facilities type projects, and what this does is it basically calculates a rough order of magnitude estimate based on the type of facility, square footage, and what type of work you're doing in that. So if you don't have a very refined cost estimate and you're not comfortable with that, by all means use this method to give you an estimate. Method B2 will be used for pavements and utilities as well as facilities projects if you have good 1391 costs. So you can choose the best one for you. I'm going to go ahead and use method B1. Project type. Project type, you can see it's a drop down. We have a new facility for our minor construction. We have facility alteration for a facility renovation type project. Then we have pavements, utilities, and demolition. So this is going to be a facility alteration. And then I'm going to go ahead and click my facility type. For this example, this is an admin facility. You can see down here a bunch of different facilities. I'm going to go with admin facility, multi-purpose administration. This is a CE headquarters building on JBSA Randolph. Year built, simple. You're pulling this from your 7115 as well as your square footage of the facility. And then technological update. The cost estimating in this program adds factors based on the complexity. So you can see in here like a hospital medical facility, it's a little more complex, going to cost a little more. This facility, admin facility, simple. Same with the complexity level. It also adds a factor in there. And again, this is for you guys to make that determination locally based on the scope of work and the type of facility you're working in. We'll use none for mine. All right, so now I'm going to go over here to facility alteration parameters. And you can see on there, these are systems. And the question came up in the first release of the business rules, does this need to add up to 100? And it does not. So we're looking at each system on its own. So each of those numbers should not exceed 100, but the cumulative of all of them may exceed 100. So in this example, I'm replacing 100% of the roof. So I'm going to put 100% there, and then a portion of the HVAC, I'll say 75%. And again, this is an estimate based on that scope. You kind of tell us what that percentage is. And that's all you have to do there. You can put zeros in for the rest, but you don't need to. The calculation will run accordingly. And yeah. A quick question there. The construction start year, use the fiscal year for that. And 1 second here. There we go. I was trying to figure out why it wasn't giving me a number. So I missed this piece in the design, either concept or pre-concept. So there you go. I put in a concept design. And now you can see down there for method B1, I have a calculated cost of $1 million based on that estimate. So now I'm done with section B, and I'm going to go on to the baseline recurring costs. So these baseline recurring costs are real data, or as real as we can get based on some good engineering judgment. We're going to use the last 2 fiscal years, so 2012 and 2013, and we're basically going to populate this spreadsheet with real data. And I as I said, this is not a real project, so I've made up some numbers here, but I'm going to go ahead and populate them so you can kind of see what it does. With respect to these numbers, operations is basically referencing your PEC 7-9 costs in a facility. So that will be potentially your service contracts, maybe your refuse and custodial, maybe another service contract in the facility if you have elevator maintenance or something like that. Energy is referencing your utilities, your utility usage. So to get that number, you're likely going to need to go talk to your utility engineer there at the base and get some of that data from them. If it's a meter facility, we'll use the kilowatt hours available to us. If not, you can go up to the help dialog there and get a little additional information on what our recommendation is to create to get that estimated cost. Preventative maintenance and corrective maintenance. This should be straight from IWIMS. If you're not familiar with pulling IWIMS and your controllers need a little help, you can go in and the Ops Engineering Playbook on the CE portal. We have done a lot of work there, created videos for you to tell you exactly how to pull this data out of IWIMS so that you can use it. But this is basically going to come straight from IWIMS by shop code and how much we spent in the past 2 fiscal years on this facility. And so once that data is in, you have a baseline recurring cost, which is essentially averaging the two, and then a calculated cost for the following fiscal year based on the work we're doing in the facility. And that's it for Section C. So finally, Section E, the last section on the input tab, third-party funds and Red Horse execution. There were some questions on third-party funds, but essentially that is money that's not coming out of the centralized portfolio. It could come from non-Air Force, maybe DLA or AFEs. It could come from a customer. Maybe a customer is contributing a portion of the funds to a requirement, but we want to capture that dollar amount, whatever that contribution is, as essentially a rebate to the requirement. And lastly, Red Horse execution, simply check it or not. This is basically if Red Horse is executing the requirement for us, we know based on past history there is some savings there, and traditionally Red Horse is around 20% cheaper than doing it via contract. So if you're going to execute a requirement via Red Horse, we want to be able to capture that savings as well. For this example, I'll say we're not going to use either of those, so I'm going to go ahead and leave them blank. So we're done. This is the input tab. Doesn't take too long. Now I'm going to go over to the summary. And as I mentioned before, you can see some of the comparison tables there in terms of the savings. But the key number we're looking at is the savings to investment ratio. You see a 0.64. And that is the value that I'm going to take now and input into ACES. I'm going to take it and put it on the other cost tab in ACES as described in the business rules. And I'm going to make sure, this is a key point, make sure you use this decimal point. Don't multiply it times a factor or anything. We want the true decimal point in there. So you simply take that, put it in ACES, and you're good to go. Last thing you want to do in this workbook is go up to File, print it to a PDF, and save it so that you have it for documentation in case we need to validate it at a later date. But that's it. That's how you do it, and that's how you run the project savings calculator. So I'm going to go ahead and switch back now to our slideshow and finish up here. So future webinar schedule, I know it's been posted earlier. It was posted on Tuesday when we briefed. This is just a little bit of a look ahead for those folks that couldn't get on this morning. We're going to do this again at 1600 today. And then you have a TNAP one and programming and an EQ webinar coming up. So mark your calendars for those and participate. At that time, that's what I had on the cost savings piece. So we're going to go ahead and open it up to any questions you have out there. And we've been tracking them on this end, and so we'll go ahead and get started.
Is BLCC a software program that's approved for our network?
The question is BLCC a software program approved for our network? And the answer is yes. You can go to the Department of Energy website and you can pull down BLCC directly from there. Again, talk to your energy managers or REMs if you have them. They, I am sure, are all very familiar with it, but you can download it right to your desktop and begin using the program.
Where is the tutorial available? Did you mention the tutorial earlier?
So where is the tutorial available? So what we are going to do with this webinar, we are recording it. So essentially what I did, the step-by-step walkthrough of this project savings calculator is going to be out there for you guys to use and replay if you'd like to. Also in there, like I mentioned, the help topics, they explain a lot of the data and what we're actually looking for in populating that data.
How would you use this tool for a demo project?
How would I use this tool for a demo project? That's a good question. So in the business rules, if you've read the business rules, we have a for demolition projects, essentially the savings, the recurring baseline costs over the acquisition costs. So if you go in a demo project, you're going to go do the drop down to demo. And let me go ahead and bring it up and walk you through. Maybe that'll be a little easier. So bear with me as I switch it back over to the project savings calculator.
While you're flipping, is the final calculator now posted?
It will be after this.
That was one of the questions.
So for this demo requirement, so up here I would go for the type, I would switch it to demolition, and you can see it grays out a lot of stuff. So we're going to go ahead and put in our method B2, our 1391 cost for that demolition, fill it in here, and then in baseline recurring costs, we're still going to take the IWIMS data we have for that facility, and what you can see here using those same costs is that the calculated cost is 0. So essentially if we're demolishing this facility, then we're going to get 100% savings over the next 25 years. And so that's how you'd use the calculator. And again, on the back end, it's going to give you an SIR of 1.83, so that's telling us that this would be a good investment.
Are we required to do both savings and BLCC, or is it advisable for a better chance of funding?
The question is, are you required to use both savings both savings and BLCC, and is it advisable? No. You're required to use one or the other to create an SIR, and as I mentioned previously, BLCC is a little more in-depth and is really going to capture your energy savings specifically. So there's a good chance that your SIR will come out a little higher with BLCC, but again, the time constraints there. So you can use either one to do it, but by no means do you have to use both.
Does the savings calculator account for multiple stories, or is it just a single story building?
Does the savings calculator account for multiple stories, or is it just a single story? The savings calculator calculates it based on square footage. However, if you, and I'm trying to find it in here, under the quantity gross square foot, so in towers and things of that nature, it's based on your vertical foot. But for a facility, it's based on total square footage. So if it's across multiple stories, it will just look at that total gross square footage.
How is the calculator affected if a project involves multiple facilities, not just one building?
So the question is, how does the calculator account for it if you have multiple facilities? And it's something similar to that. If you read the business rules, would be a consolidation and divestment project. So one where we're moving out of a building and moving into a new one. So in the event that you're doing that, multiple facilities, what we want you to do is calculate an SIR for each facility, and then do a weighted cost average there for your total project. So you do this for building 1 and come up with an SIR. You do it for building 2 and come up with an SIR, and then based on the cost of each requirement, use that weighted average to come up with the total.
Should we check the red horse box if the project is being executed by a similar group like PRTC or CTS?
Yes, that is the same concept there. Yep, definitely. Oh, I'm not sure you heard my comment. I'm sorry there, heard the question. But the question is, if it is a PRTC, if PRTC is going to execute the project in lieu of a red horse, do we still check the red horse tab? And the answer to that is yes.
Do we use the cost savings calculator for every project?
Question is, do we use the cost savings calculator for every project? And the answer is yes, one or the other, to come up with an SIR. Now, what does that mean? If you don't have an SIR, does not mean you're not going to compete in the IPL. If you have a risk score for a consequence of failure and probability of failure, we're still going to see those requirements. And so if a facility does really well in those areas, it's going to float to the top. However, if it doesn't have an SIR, it just will not be eligible for any of those points.
What documentation is required for supporting the facility cost estimates in the spreadsheet?
What documentation is required to support the facility cost estimates in the spreadsheet? And I'm guessing is that if you're using method B2, I'm assuming, for the cost estimate. What we would expect there is that when you print out this report to a PDF, that value in the acquisition cost is going to match your programmed amount for the requirement.
Okay. Barb Wilt at ACC wants to know, how do you know what type of roof the savings calculator is assuming? Does it assume you have a certain kind of roof?
So the question is, does the savings calculator can the savings calculator tell what type of roof we have? The answer is no. It's going to assume it based on the type of facility. However, there is some adjustment in there. For example, on Randolph, JBSA Randolph being a historic district, a lot of those are tile roofs. So you can account for that through the historical requirements piece of the savings calculator. For a roof like that would cost more.
Do we need to reference which method was used in AFCEC? Are you going to put it in the description?
The question is, do we need to reference what method was used in ACES to whether we use SIR or BLCC? And for that piece, I would say yes, it would not hurt. So in the other cost tab on the right side of it is a comments piece. So when you put SIR in there, I would add the comment whether it was BLCC or Project Savings Calculator. And then also, if you've seen in the business rules, there's a validation section. So those requirements that are floating to the top, especially those with the high SIR, we're going to be looking for your validation on those. So you're going to have that saved to the SharePoint site so that it's available for us to review and look at and ask questions just to make sure we understand how you came up with those costs or those assumptions.
Okay, so I think I'm interpreting this one right. The comment is regarding that BLCC tool, the user can set the payback period to best suit the system, but this new savings calculator automatically defaults to 25 years. So the net result is going to be different. Which one should they use?
So the question is, for BLCC, you can adjust the payback period based on the type of equipment. And that is one of the big differences between BLCC and the Project Savings Calculator. We're using the 25-year set payback for the calculator. But BLCC, we're still going to use a 25-year payback. What that means, though, is your individual components might have a shorter payback period, or a shorter life cycle. So in our accounting, we need to account for a component renewal somewhere in there to make sure that it's apples-to-apples comparison across a 25-year period.
In the IPL process, how are we distinguishing risk-based projects from savings-only projects?
So the question is, in the IPL process, how are we distinguishing risk-based projects from savings-only projects? So the short answer to that is every single project, if it's going to show up on the IPL, will require a COF score and a POF score. So that is one area we're pulling to make sure that you have that. So every project is going to have a risk component to it. how we will identify the savings ones are essentially those requirements with an SIR greater than 1. We're going to look for those specifically. Now, if it's a really good project risk-wise and has a high SIR, we obviously wouldn't pull that out because it's going to score well on its own. But for those lower risk projects that are kind of on the lower left, if you remember that quadrant we showed, those are the ones we're going to identify that have the big bubbles and a high SIR. But every single requirement out there should have a POF score and a COF score.
I didn't see anywhere, this is from a guest, I did not see anywhere that future savings is input, like energy efficiency improvements.
So the guest said, I did not see anywhere in there where future savings, such as energy efficiencies, are captured in the calculator. So one area you will see savings is essentially in the energy recurring calculated costs. So you will see reductions there from your baseline costs to account for that energy. But that is a good point. The project savings tool, as I mentioned, does not get down to the component level where we can truly capture all those energy efficiencies. If that's what you're doing in your requirement, in your project scope, then by all means BLCC is the better tool for that. What we're really trying to get after in the calculator is O&M cost savings tied to corrective maintenance and where our ops personnel are spending all their time fixing broken stuff is definitely where the project savings calculator is showing the most savings.
From Patricia Gray at AFCEC, can the third-party cost savings include rebates earned after project execution?
So the question is, can the third-party funds account for rebates earned after projects or after project execution? So yes, the short answer is yes. So an example there, and I'm guessing I'm following you, Patricia, is a utility rebate from your utility company. So we do something and the utility comes back and cuts us a check for $30,000. Yes, we want to capture that in there in the third-party funds. I know those guys that use BLCC regularly are already doing that and using that as part of their SIR calculation.
Okay, so this question is from Ramstein. Going back to calculating an SIR for each facility in a project, do they also need to do that if they're using BLCC as opposed to the savings calculator?
The question is, if you're going to use BLCC versus savings calculator and you have multiple facilities, do you still need to calculate an SIR for each facility using BLCC? And I think the answer to that, I may have to get some more info on that one, but looking at it from the front, I would say yes, we use the same process with the weighted average. But I know BLCC is a little different. We can quantify components and we can quantify all those components from all the facilities. So in the final Q&As that are posted, I will revisit that and get a better answer.
Okay, so next up, also from Ramstein. With energy funds, we had to do a separate BLCC calculation for each energy conservation measure if we bundled multiple items. Will we have to do a BLCC for each building and each ECM? I guess same one.
Yeah, so a similar question for the energy program. It said you had to bundle items for every if you were going to have different energy conservation measures. Bottom line is we need to be able to justify the numbers and the data we're putting in there. So however we do it, it needs to make sense, and we need to be able to validate it and look at it and understand it. Hopefully that answers your question.
From Buckley, is it acceptable to use a different cost savings calculator for pavement?
From Buckley, is it acceptable to use a different cost savings calculator for pavements? Yeah, if you have something like that, please send it to us. I would say on the front end, no, not at this time. However, if you got a good idea out there that we can incorporate into future cycles, then by all means, we want to hear it.
How long is the savings calculation data good for? Does it need to be updated annually each year?
So how long is the savings calculation data good for? Does it need to be updated yearly? And the answer is that it will need to be updated, and so there will be, this is the version we will use this cycle. It will be updated on an annual basis, and with the end goal of really trying to consolidate the best parts of BLCC and the savings calculator into one whole document. I mean, that is our end goal. But if you're familiar with BLCC, there are annual updates to BLCC too. So it would be a similar process.
Can you explain how the program handles historic facilities for final calculation in the SIR, or does it have any impact at all?
Can you explain how the program handles historic facilities for final calculations in the SIR, or does it have any impact at all? So the calculator focuses on historic facilities on the front end in terms of determining your costs. So as you know, if you work in historical facilities, we do have typically a higher contract cost to do it. Subsequently, our SIR is not going to be as high in historic facilities, and we know that. I think that's part of a cost of doing business, and some of the external constraints that we can't necessarily get around.
Do we have to calculate an SIR for every risk-based project?
All right. So the question is do we have to have an SIR for all projects that we calculate a POF and COF for? And I briefly touched on it earlier, but the short answer there is no. So if you have an SIR or you don't put an SIR in there, it will show up as a 0 and you won't receive any points for it. So if you're comfortable with how the project scores based on risk alone, then you don't necessarily need to capture that. However, if, as I demonstrated here walking through this tutorial, it doesn't take long to get a value in there, so it would be our recommendation that you do include an SIR so we can capture those savings.
The next question from Milton Hall. With no PECI funds, now if we have a fast payback energy project that pays back in less than a year, but it doesn't score on the mission or criticality scores, how will it get visibility? I think they're asking really how is a savings only project
We're going to slide back up. He's got a good slide.
Yeah, so the question is basically how does the savings only requirement get visibility, because it's going to have a bad score. And I'm going to go back here and go back a couple slides in here to the matrix. And so this, of course, this is only a handful of projects. We're going to have a much more populated matrix once we start seeing scores come in. But these items there, 8 and 9 on the lower left of the quadrant, those are those big bubbles. So the size of that bubble is important, and those big bubbles are going to be what how we get visibility on those requirements. And also when we do our poll, we're going to be able to filter by the SIR, and we're going to be able to identify anything with an SIR over 1 and kind of lump them together and take a look at them and see what makes sense in terms of drawing cut lines and lumping them together. Yeah, and you can see here, we just brought up another slide, so the two-pronged approach. You can see in the draft priority order there, you see 26 savings only tier 1, and that's going to be something potentially, obviously this is all notional, but between a SIR of 2 and 4, a bunch of requirements there lumped together. Then we might do another risk-based requirement, and then we might insert another tier with a little lower SIR, and that's kind of how we're gonna tee those up for our C council to make decisions and insert them into the IPL. So there's all the questions. I want to go back real quick and talk to the consolidated piece again with multi-facilities. We will revisit it, like I said in the QA. I want to look at compare some of the outputs and what that would look like based on the savings, because we want to make sure we're capturing all the savings, and we want to show that if we're compounding savings by doing multiple projects together. So we will revisit that in the Q&A that is officially posted. I see a guest too said, where is the savings calculator available? Yep, the link right above it, and I will be going in after this meeting and putting in a more current version there, but it will be in that same location, integration program group, along with the business rules.
Long term, ops engineering playbook.
But long term, it will be posted, and the most up-to-date version will be in the ops engineering playbook, along with those videos and different guidance that I mentioned there before.
It looks like you've got a follow-up on the historic facility calculation. How will the scoring be adjusted or noted to show that we are competing for limited funding against other projects that don't have that limiting factor? Are they going to get any additional help because they're historical basis?
So F.E. Warren is following up with respect to the historical facility question, and are they going to be? It's because it's a limiting factor, being that it's an historic facility and it's going to cost a little more. Unfortunately, the short answer to that is no, and the reason is the whole purpose of savings is to, no kidding, save dollars. So we want to make sure that we are focusing our efforts on that piece of it. So will that mean the savings are less in those facilities? Absolutely. But however, if they're scoring well historically, based on the risk factor, they're still going to compete well in the model.
When pursuing an ESPC or a UESC, you may group facilities or bundle. Is it still okay for SIR in that type of a project?
We just need to figure out if it's weighted average or additional.
Yep. So when pursuing an ESPC or UESC, you may group facilities or bundle. Is this still okay for SIR in that type of project? Again, that's a piece that we're gonna work out. We owe you an answer on. We're gonna have to take a look at that piece.
How much renovation is needed to change the facility effective age?
How much renovation is needed to change the facility effective age? You're going to have to take a look and play with some of the parameters there in terms of how it's calculated. You can also go into the additional tabs that are hidden there and see how that buildup is done to calculate the effective age. I don't have that off the top of my head, unfortunately.
Keith Chan from AMC. The demo example appears to have the building starting at full operational state based on baseline cost input. Is that allowed? Yeah, so the example I just did on the demo, it looks like it has full operational costs is the comment from AMC. I did not update those numbers. So theoretically, if we have vacated a facility, these numbers are not going to be nearly that high for that facility. So you're not going to have the same recurring costs. But if it's a demo consolidation requirement, where we're going to demolish the building, then by all means you will have those operational costs, and they will be somewhere in this ballpark, and we will be able to capture those as part of that project. From Travis, who's responsible for performing the cost savings calculation for each project? Is it CEO, CEN, or AMP managers?
Answer to that is yes. Yes to the question, CEO, CEN, or AMP managers, who's responsible for doing the cost savings for each project? You all are. So whoever has the data, if it's an ops engineer that's working closely with his controllers and can get it, we envision that this is going to be a teamed up process. So there's going to be parts of this that go into each arena, whether it's a programmer, whether it's maybe even an execution person that's giving you some cost estimating, or whether it's an ops engineer that's working closely with the ops flight. So another question came up here at Warren. We often experience these types of difficulties with competing mandates, ATFP, SIR, energy, cultural resources, when the greater percentage of our base real property is classified historical. This added that our facilities are close to, if not all, older than 100 years. Okay, so that's a comment there. And Chuck Sear just inputted, he's our natural infrastructure AMP champ for the Air Force. Yes, the SIR the project savings calculator. This is focusing on built infrastructure only. The natural infrastructure has business rules in place and has a different process for calculating savings, and that'll be part of their webinar coming towards the end of the month. Thanks for the input, Chuck.
Mine calculator showed off data to 2012. IRIMS only allows data back 12 months. Where does or did the historical data come from?
Basis should be able to access to the firearms data.
So BASIS should be able to access. The question is, the calculator showed ops data for 2012. IWIMS only allows data back to 12 months. Where did this historical data come from? So that the BASIS should be able to access IWIMS data for the past 2 fiscal years. So we just entered 2014. You should be able to get that data. Are there any other questions out there? We got a Warren request an offline conversation regarding historic facilities. By all means, give us a call. And we got your information there. So if that's it, again, I really appreciate you guys tuning in. We're going to do this again at 1600 Central Standard Time. So please, if you have more questions, keep them coming. And by all means, we're an open, transparent process here. We want to know your feedback. We know we don't have all the answers, and we need your help out there in the field to get the right answers. So that's all we have here. I appreciate it, and we'll talk to you later.